History is one connection. It's only a fool or someone who's in denial that tries to compartmentalize and say, oh, we're just here now. Everything of the here and now is a result of the past, and vice versa. It's all one collective continuum, so to speak. And since we're talking about the Megillah says it in very beautiful, succinct terms. It says, Hayomim ha'ela niskarim v'nasim. That these days you shall remember and recreate, which is a fundamental principle in Jewish thought, that time is not just the past, present, and future, it's recreated. It's a type of energy that when we come back to that point in time, Purim, we're actually re-experiencing what happened then, not just remembering. It's not just a commemoration.
Doesn't the Baal Shem Tov have an interpretation on this?
Yeah, he says that when you read the Megillah backwards, the Talmud says, when you read the Megillah backwards, who would read a Megillah backwards? But the Baal Shem Tov's interpretation makes it clear. If you read the Megillah backwards, it's as if you hadn't read it. It's not, lo yotze, you're not, you haven't fulfilled the mitzvah, right. So the Baal Shem Tov says, if you read it backwards, as if it happened then, and not today, it's not the way to experience it. And this, I think, is critical in the answer of your question. Events of today, to truly understand them, especially global events, and especially when, you can't ignore the fact, as you put it, it's all happening in ancient Persia. The area of Persia is Iraq, Iran, that whole little section there. Then it was called Babylon, Persia, those are the names. So how could you ignore the fact when you see similar battles? So really it's only about different names of characters, but the same ideas, which has been going on from the beginning of time, which is we live in a world which in some ways is concealed from its true purpose, which is what God designed it for. And as a result of that, people go off on their own agenda, and ultimately that evolves into what we call blatant evil. The reason that one person can hurt another, that someone can get up and kill another person, an innocent person, is only as a result because they don't feel that we're part of one integral whole. The right arm would never attack the left arm. So basically, evil from a Jewish perspective, and not to minimize the tragedy of it, is essentially it's a result of God's concealment in this world. And the hotbed of that concealment always took place in that region. Bavel, which is the name for Babylon, actually means confusion, a place of confusion. Persia, as you see in the Megillah, the story, it also was a lot of confusion going on among it all. And then finally, the day of Purim was a day of clarity, where it illuminated and crystallized what is true and what is false. So I would say, in a somewhat of a general context, any war of a righteous battle against people who take away the right of others to live in peace, no matter what their intentions are. Bottom line is violence, death, murder, terrorism, homicide, whatever you want to call it, is just not acceptable. Not just acceptable, not acceptable to anyone, because it's part of the universal code that God gave us. I'm stating this because in case people may wonder, why do we have to do it this way? Why do we have to do it? Why not go with a peaceful approach? Why not send them flowers or something like that? And the answer is very obvious, because there is a certain type of moral lack of ambiguity. There is a divine blueprint for life. That divine blueprint includes no violence and not allowing to kill each other, no matter what your intentions are. When that is violated, and you see a civilization basically is in danger, as President Bush put it, and I'm not justifying all his political intentions, but at the core of it, that the defending the right of all people to live peacefully is at the core of the essence of a battle. In many ways, it goes back to the battle. Haman, out of his irrational hatred of Jews, and it could have been not just Jews, it could have been any group, decides that he wants to kill the Jews for jealousy, whatever the reason, his ego. And that's simply the battle of all mankind from the beginning of time, not allowing that type of...
So basically we're still engaged. That long battle is still going on.
Absolutely.
And what is our role?
Even Saddam Hussein identified himself with Nebuchadnezzar.
He did, yes.
Of age. He called himself that. One of his battalions was that.
Babylonia, right, one of them was called.
And Nebuchadnezzar essentially is the grandfather or the predecessor of Achashverosh of Purim. And that's the story. So I don't want to, in a sense, also pit everything in absolute terms, as if President Bush is Mordechai and Iraq is. I think it's much more complex than that, but there are commonalities that we can learn from this, and getting beyond the complexity, it comes down to what do you stand for? What do we stand for?
Well, we all have the people of Mordechai. As the Megillah itself has the terminology of Mordechai, the people of Mordechai.
Right. So. I honestly really believe that our biggest challenge today is one of identifying our mission. With years of prosperity, I grew up in freedom as you did.
Unlike our parents.
Correct. Our parents grew up under Stalin in Russia. Our brothers and sisters grew up under Hitler in Europe. So when you grow up in freedom, I think there's a very big challenge. It's called complacency. A sense of everything is fine. I wake up in the morning, there's nothing compelling. When you have an enemy, you need to fight. You need to believe in something. You need to defend yourself. And this complacency settles in to almost creating almost like a comatose state where we think everything is just cool. And then a September 11th happens, or in Israel they're going through September 11th every day, unfortunately. And you suddenly realize life is not exactly as I thought it was. It's not just about websites and cable stations and Super Bowls. And I think Purim is very much like that type of wake-up call. You mentioned something which I wanted to touch upon, if I may.
Sure.
Purim, interesting as well, God's name is never mentioned in the entire Megillah. Not once. It's a book of the Bible. How could God's name not be mentioned? It's a God's miracle, after all. At the same time, as you also implied earlier, Purim can be interpreted completely random. Bunch of random events. Achashverosh happened to get angry at his wife and kills her. A little while later, he happens to take Esther as a new queen. A while later, Mordechai happens to overhear a conspiracy. A while later, years later, Achashverosh happens to have insomnia. He can't sleep one night.
Right.
That's about it. And so they read him a book. What book do they read him? The story of how Mordechai
Chronicles.
saved him. Yeah. He suddenly wants to reward him. So you have all kinds of dots that if you were living at the time, this happened over, by the way, a period of 7 to 9 years. Mm-hmm. You were living at the time, random here, random there, a bunch of independent events, fragmented events. It's only in retrospect, you step back and you say, hey, it all connects, that Esther was in the right place in the right time, and to be able to foil the plot of Haman. One of the big messages of that is that God doesn't always work as an open way where he parts the sea. God's true way of working is through our lives. The mysterious ways of divine providence are always there before us. So there are times in history we clearly need an awakening, a exodus from Egypt, a parting of the sea, a revelation at Sinai. But the truth, majority of our lives, is finding God between the lines, connecting the dots. The seemingly random dots. You travel somewhere and you think, I'm just here on business or on pleasure. No, it's not true. God leads your footsteps. You have to look for now the opportunity. And I think Purim is very much about that discovery that the world that we see, as random as it seems and as circumstantial, is not arbitrary at all. There is a plan, but there's one final part of the plan which is up to us. What are you going to do about it? That's free will. There God says, I can set the stage for you, I can give you everything on the platter, but you have to take it. You have to choose.
What do we have to do? In straightforward terms, there's a world out there, there's concern, there's confusion,